Welcome to the Adapt Performance Podcast, the podcast that lets you delve into the minds of world-class guests all involved in the pursuit of performance. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into it. What's going on, guys? So just to set the scene for today's podcast, I'm joined by Paul Smith. Paul Smith is England's strongest man. He's been at World's Strongest Man. So you could kind of say he knows a thing or two about elite sport and generally just being a strong human being. Not only is Paul a really successful athlete, he is also a coach, which I think is always a good balance actually, because he understands the theory really, really well. He's a smart, knowledgeable guy, but he's honed his craft over years and years of, spending time under the bar, of training, trial and error, doing things right, doing things wrong. So really, really good guy to speak to. This was a fun podcast to record because it really just was a big conversation around training and things we've done in the past and how we would approach different situations. We get into evidence-based practice and speaking about how we actually think critically around some of the journals. We discuss what role sprinting, plyometrics, ballistics, those types of training methods actually have in a strength sport such as strongman, powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting. And we also have a little bit of a delicate dabble around the taboo subject of performance enhancing drugs and how that potentially does affect your trainability, your injury risk, and maybe even your mindset. So really, really interesting episode. So I'm not going to blabber on for too long more, so let's just get into it. What's going on, Paul? Thank you for coming to the podcast, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's bright and sunny outside, so I'm living the dream, trying to get a tan on this pasty skin. So the world is good, mate. The world is good. So for all the podcast listeners out there that don't know you already, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself, what you've done in the past and where you're currently at?
So I'm Paul Smith, I'm 27 years old. I am a professional strongman. I'm currently England's strongest man. Title I've won 3 times. I've been a world's strongest man competitor, won a junior world's strongest man competition, and coming up I have the UK strongest man next week, so hopefully another one to the resume.
Yeah, that's sick. Exciting times. How long have you been lifting, mate? How long have you been involved in strength sports?
So I first lifted weights at probably 13 boxing, but that was like, we might have a session every 6 weeks at the boxing gym. From being 14, I started lifting regular, but it was like the Argos weights at home, watching Simpsons doing curls. Curls and shrugs and this weird row thing that I do, which I think is why my traps are strong. So I was doing those then when I was 14. And then from being like 50, and I got a barbell in the garden and then joined the gym. So like halfway through year 11, joined the local gym, went with a couple of mates from school. And then from there, got more and more into it. Doing other sports at the same time. But then I did a strongman competition that was local. I kind of got entered by a guy at the gym who knew I was strong. That was 2011, so I was 16. And then from there, it, full on onto the circuit and worked my way up from there.
So is that that first strongman competition, was that like your first realization, like, shit, I'm good at this, I could do well here?
Kind of. So I always knew I was strong the last few years compared to like lads at school, and then I was getting to be one of the strongest guys in the gym because I had I never realized I was, but one day I saw all like the big bodybuilder guys in rack pulls, and they were doing like 200, 210 kilos, maybe 220. And I was like, I'm like 20, 30 kilos behind them. I was like, I might be stronger than I realized. When I went to the strongman competition, the guys were a lot stronger than me. I came second to last. So it was almost like I wasn't quite as strong as I thought I was compared to the guy at the gym. Obviously, it's a different mindset compared to bodybuilders, how they look at strength. But then I quickly realized, hold on, I've got a long time here. They're all 10 years older than me. I've got potential, shall we say. So that was kind of the mindset after the comp.
That's sick. And I guess from an early on then, so being super strong from an early age or within your first few years of training, what do you kind of put your your strength down to? Is it like a genetic thing? Did you have sick training partners like really early on? What would you kind of put that early success down to?
So I definitely think there's a genetic element. My dad's always been a strong guy. He was never a big guy, but he was always one of them. He said, I think he was about 11 and a half stone when he was like most of his adult life before he got a bit fat, but he was middle aged. But he said he was always like one of the best at arm wrestling. Used to work in the steelworks, so did all sorts of challenges. And I think he was always never the best, but one of the best compared to the bigger guys. And like my sister, for example, is freakishly good at arm wrestling, even though she's about 9 stone wet through. So there's definitely some kind of genetic element there. But I started training pretty young and I started doing a variety of sports. And I think basically I just built a really good athletic base. By the time I was getting into my late teens and really focusing on strongman, I built a brilliant base of all round like capacity that just let me really build on once I kind of specialize more.
Yeah, I think just from knowing you as an athlete and a trainer, just seeing like some of the training that you have done in the past, you're not a typical strong man in the sense that you're just this static blob. You know, I've seen you sprint, I've seen you wrestle, jump, throw, all that other stuff that you just said there, athletic. So it's cool to see. So based off that, then I want to kind of segue into what's your kind of philosophy now, where you're currently at around training for strength sports?
That's a big question. So I'd say with me, my big thing, I've always been a kind of a block periodization guy, especially with strongman. It's a multifaceted sport, a lot more than people think. They think of kind of powerlifting, which is very much maximal strength, maximal force, sagittal play. Your 2 feet are in place, your close skill. Everything's always the same. Whereas strongman, it's much more dynamic. Energy systems wise, it's much more varied than people think. We have events generally up to 75 seconds, but sometimes pushing 2 minutes. So we're into that lactate threshold kind of energy system that is obviously a lot different to just pure power output. And then we have carrying events, we have throwing events, we have events for reps, event for maxes. So we've got to cover a lot more bases and components of training. So my training is always adjusted in blocks, and it'll just be over the year working through various skills and trying to bring everything up individually, obviously peaking for competitions, but making sure throughout the year I'm building pretty much every component that I need to, rather than just building that max strength for competition day.
Got you. So I guess if we was just to quickly characterize like the strength sports, and I think there might be more, but I'm kind of thinking of like the big three. We've got strongman, which you've kind of mentioned there. What is it, 5 events in a day? Is that
again? It's not standing. Generally 5 events in one day, can be 6 or 7, but then it could be 5 events over 3 days. So you're generally looking at 5-6 events, but you do get multiple day competitions. So it's another challenge. It's not a 1 day, 2 hour competition. It might be 3 hours. It might be over 4 days. It's a big variation.
Got you. Okay. So we've got this really unpredictable beast. I think that's kind of how I would characterize strongman. You've just got to be strong at fucking everything, you know, in a way. So yeah, really dynamic. You've then got powerlifting, which is squat, bench, and deadlift, which, like you just said there, really kind of closed chain, just stand up with a heavy weight, press a heavy weight. It's not one dimensional, but in that facet, it kind of is. Max strength, just grind out a heavy single. And then you've got, I guess, more towards the speed side of things, you've got Olympic weightlifting, you know, so you've got your snatch and you've got your clean and jerk, which is still strength, but there's obviously a heavy speed component to that. So just kind of going through those 3 then, would you say your philosophy for training each one of those differs?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the biggest thing with strongman is the energy system work. So having to be a bigger base of conditioning and fitness and being able to work for longer periods of time. Now, I do think a lot of powerlifters and weightlifters don't quite work enough on their work capacity because I guess that's what we're here for, to get into detail. For me, conditioning of strongman is I need to be able to do a loading medley for 75 seconds. I need to be able to also do 6 events in 3 hours and recover between events, so that I can compete to my best in every one, I also need to be able to do a 4-hour training session where I'm doing 8 events and multiple sets, lots of reps, and get through that efficiently. So there's different components and conditioning rather than just for the actual event on comp day, I need to be able to do this for a minute. So I think with powerlifters and weightlifters, they could push their work capacity a little bit more, purely so they can have more training, more volume, and obviously more training, more volume, in theory leads to more improvements and more gains. But I would, how I approach it with powerlifters and weightlifters, it's probably a little bit more specific, building specific volume up, rather than strongman being a lot more general conditioning. Like, for example, for strongman, I do a lot of assault bikes, maybe row machines. On the off season, I'll be doing hill sprints. And the off season just gone, I was doing some actual for strongman, fairly long, just run steady state, which I wouldn't really do much of for a powerlifter or weightlifter. But the strongman is, you can do conditioning workouts for strongman like medleys, keg loads, sandbag carriage, which are great and are needed, but they can be very taxing. So it is good to build a base of less intense or less taxing methods, such as the kind of typical cardio machines, which I probably wouldn't do with powerlifting and weightlifting. It probably should be more building volume on the closer to competition lifts. Other than that, with powerlifting, I guess you're, like say, static, you're in one spot, so it won't be as much focus on single leg work, dynamic, just movements as much. But I would think there'd be a big, well, I've coached a lot of powerlifters, there is still a big big focus on like RFD, and making people explosive, because I think because powerlifting is a slow sport, people forget that you actually really need to build up the speed, strength, and the explosive power, because a maximal lift is massively about explosive power. Even if it's not moving quickly, you've got to have the intent to produce force as quickly as possible, which obviously weightlifters have down to a T. I think that gets overlooked in powerlifting. I think there's a little bit too much focus on trying to grind through lifts rather than trying to make things fast. So I'd say that's probably the main difference between how I'd approach powerlifting and strongman and weightlifting.
Sick. Yeah, I think you covered a lot of good points there, which I think are really interesting. So I want to dig into a few of them. So you mentioned around the energy system stuff being a big factor for strongman training. And you know, you mentioned around being able to do multiple events in the same day, or, you know, across multiple days, which is very aerobic. You know, the aerobic system just allows you to recover between sets, between workouts, between days. You know, that is the base building that we just kind of spoke about. What have you found, I guess, around the community side of it then? You know, because typically you go on bodybuilding.com, cardio kills your gains, mate. So how are you going to convince this guy that just loves to bench, squat, all those things, that actually this is going to be the thing for you?
Yeah, so it's something I encounter a lot of. So what I do often with clients that are, it depends, because you get some guys that are from really athletic backgrounds, some guys that are just kind of gym guys. But I start really simply. I'll start low intensity, steady state, and I'll give them something like a treadmill walk. And it might be like 15 minutes on a bit of an incline. And they can go on their phone and text while they're doing it because it's so easy. But you just get them into the habit of doing a little bit, and then you build that up, you build up the intensity. They start to realize that they feel better, they feel more well recovered. And then from there, they start to buy in. So you just got like really base level, get them into it without them having to work too hard or put too much effort in, and then just slowly build up as they kind of buy into the process.
Yeah, it makes sense, mate. I think it's got to be those small steps, you know, especially when you're dealing with a lifetime of kind of misinformation around cardio and killing gains and muscle and those types of things. Not that it's always wrong, you know, that cardio kills your gains, because up until a certain point it won't, but then it will, you know. So yeah, I think it's finding that point. And I guess you mentioned here, like earlier, around your own kind of training around long distance running and, you know, hill sprints and stuff. And typically, you know, I guess the general stereotypical strongman bod is 120, 130 kilo, obviously outside of the weight class side of things. How do you kind of approach building somebody up to running when they've got a lot of body weight and probably pretty weak ankles? How do you kind of approach that usually?
So for me, I've had very few people actually do like proper running. I have a few guys doing hill sprints. I have a lot of guys doing like footwork drills, but I don't think I've ever actually prescribed someone a long run. The approach I take with myself is different because I know myself. I know myself inside out. I know what training I've done before. I know I can handle running at 130 kilos, at least to a decent extent, and I'm going to be all right. Most guys I won't touch it with because I don't know quite how they react, and it's not a massively important thing. Like for me, I put the runs in main as a cardio base. It mainly is something that I thought I'm going to wake up early in winter. I'm not going to want to do them. It's just a bit of a mental toughness thing. I can remember running for like the storms, and it was just good to push myself out of my comfort zone. So it's not necessarily something I'd use with a lot of guys. I try and stick to more low impact stuff. So rowers, bikes, salt bikes, things like that. But if I had a guy for a long, long time and I knew his background well, it might be something that I'd put in, assuming they weren't too heavy. It's just a case of horses for courses.
Got you. And I guess, do you train many like strongmen that are a little bit lighter, like 90 kilo, 100 kilo? Would that kind of change, or would you still kind of err on the side of caution just because you don't know the training history with it?
Yeah, I've got a lot of weight class guys. I've got a girl that competes under 64, and I've got opens at 150 kilos, 160 kilos. It would differ, but again, the other thing as well I should say is I train multiple times a week. Like in my off season, I think I was up to 11, but I think I actually had 12 sessions down at one point. But I don't think I ever really got there. Just trying to fit everything in. But most guys have got them out of 3, 4, maybe 5 sessions. They've got 9 to 5 jobs, so the kind of bang for your buck of running for someone like that isn't really enough to fit it into that tighter schedule. Whereas if I've got the luxury of doing 10 sessions a week, I can dedicate half an hour, 45 minutes to one of those. So it would depend on having someone that's actually got enough training time, which is fairly rare for the clients that I have.
Sick. So I guess going on to that, just because that's an interesting point. So you're full-time strongman, right? You dedicate your life towards kind of training, is that correct?
Yes, I do coach. I do online coaching, but the beauty of online coaching is you can do it at home. You can work around time. So I've got essentially unlimited time to train, as much as I need to do.
Sick. Okay. So building up to, I guess, 12, 11 sessions in a week, how does that generally look for you then? So when you were at that point, what did, your Monday to Sunday kind of comprise of?
Right. Oh God, I hate putting me on the spot here. So I might not be able to give you exact days, but I think I was doing Monday. I think I was doing 6 normal gym sessions, lifting. I was doing, or was it 5? And I might have been 5 gym sessions, 2 grip training sessions. I was bouldering twice a week. I was running twice a week. I mean, 5, 7, 9, 11. Yeah, I think that was my block. It was mostly 2 a days, but I can't remember exactly how I set it up. But yeah, I think it's 5 gym sessions, 2 grip sessions, 2 bouldering sessions, and then 2 running sessions.
Sick. So yeah, you've got a lot in there then. And I guess with that, just this is kind of going on a different little bit of a tangent. So I guess my thoughts with stronger guys is I've always had to be a little bit more cautious with how often I program certain lifts, particularly around the squats and the deadlifts, So me with my weights at the moment, me doing a 100 kilo squat, I could probably do that 4 or 5 times a week because the relative load is just not that heavy. Whereas for somebody like you that's squatting, I don't know, 200, 250, 3, whatever it is,
340.
like I was waiting for it. I could see you like just biting your tongue, getting ready. So for somebody that is squatting 340 pounds, then
kilos.
Yeah, I knew it. Not letting it slip. So did you find? Well, I guess this is kind of going back because I've never been that strong, so I don't know how it feels. I can remember reading a while ago around one of the Lily bridges, and it might have been Eric. Which one's was it Ernie? I can't remember which one it was.
Eric's the slightly better one, the younger one. I mean, Ernie's pretty strong too, but
yeah. And I can remember him kind of talking around how he bases his training program around 1 week he'll do a heavy deadlift day and a light squat, and then the next week will be his heavy squat, light deadlift. He wanted to alternate how heavy he went on any given week because he's squatting 450, 500. What's your kind of thoughts on that? So I guess he's going with this super high intensity, low frequency model. And I imagine, I don't know, are you going kind of the opposite side of that? More frequency, lower intensity?
Yeah, so although it definitely is a thing that once you get stronger, relatively, you will be able to do less work and less recovery. My deadlift stalled for a few years, which obviously the strongman is like, the world's ending. My rep PBs would go up, but I just never seemed to move my 1 rep max. And I was in a point of doing a weekly deadlift session, all be pretty heavy, but then I'd have a week off of pulling. And that worked fine up to 306 kilos. After that, I realized it just wasn't working. And actually, the guy who coaches Shannon, he was deadlifting really high frequency. And I thought I'd try it because, what I'm doing at the moment doesn't work. So I ended up pulling 5 times a week. And now my deadlift started progressing massively again. What I found is at first it was quite a struggle, but over time now I can pull 5 times a week pretty comfortably. I've dropped down to coming up to comp, I dropped down to 4 and then 3. And it feels like I'm not training at all because my recovery capacity is so high. So I do get the thing of you will have to recover more as you get heavier and stronger. But I think for most people, it's just a cop out to do less work. Because I've got a big thing with generally as people get through the lifting career, they don't quite want to work as hard. They don't generally put the volume in. Like you'll see a 16-year-old killing himself on 5, 5, 6, 6s on squats. But the 33-year-old guy be like, no, I don't want to do that. I can't recover from it. It's like, well, why don't you do it 150 kilos, 40% of your max? That'll be beneficial. It's easy. It's not going to kill you. But people don't want to do that. It's also the same with read a Jim Wendler quote. It's like the kid in high school is going to work harder on his curls than the pro powerlifter. Now, there is a thing of what they need to put your effort in, but basically, you get older and older, you kind of get a bit complacent. So I'm massively on the ball of not doing that. So I lift a lot more frequently than I used to when I was younger. So that's the thing with the deadlift, it's out massively. And pretty much every other lift, once I increase the frequency, it goes up.
Yeah, I think just bringing that back to basics, it's what you've kind of mentioned a few times is, okay, when you've got a strong man and you want to kind of get them fitter, you start off nice and easy, you gradually build it up because the body adapts, give it a little bit at a time. And what you've just said there around frequency, you've gone from doing one heavy deadlift every other week to gradually building up to 5 times a week. And now you feel fine. That is the body in a nutshell, isn't it? It's don't give it too much too soon, otherwise it'll break. But if you gradually increase it over time, that's how you get stronger, more powerful. That's essentially what training is. So yeah, just kind of nice to reinforce basics, essentially. Nothing is groundbreaking nowadays.
Yeah, of course. Because if you look at I think people see strength is different, but I think it's almost overlooked the skill side of it. Well, it is often overlooked, the skill side of it. Something weightlifters have down, super heavyweight, super strong weightlifter, still going to be training 5, 6 times a week. They might not be training 12 times a week like the 63 kilo lifter, but they're still going to be training a lot. And if you look at a long distance runner, they're not going to be well, I run a 27-minute 10K now, so I'm only going to run once a week.
Yeah.
I'll get better doing that because it's more intense. It's just not going to happen. The mileage is still going to be massively high and will increase throughout the career, which I also used to read on a lot of the old Russian literature on powerlifting, increased training, at least tonnage over your career because you adapt to more work capacity. But then some guys don't do that. They go down. It doesn't make sense to me how you're going to continue to adapt later into your career.
Yeah, it's there's definitely some clues from some of the literature from a while ago. I can remember being at the EIS, I was on a work placement and I was doing it around GB boxing and para table tennis. And one of the S&C coaches at the time, he was like, right, so the guys they're kind of in a little bit of an off period away from the actual sport. And this was table tennis, actually. And he said they wanted time away from the table, but they all loved training, and we kind of identified that physically they wasn't amazing at the time. And he basically gave me this journal, and it was, it was translated from Russian bloody 200 years ago or whatever. And it was based around just increasing the amount of sessions they do up to about 300% in the gym, so they'd they'd gradually built up to that. So they may have usually done 3 sessions a week, but they built up to like doing, I think it was 9 or 10 sessions over the week. And the way he structured it was super cool and, gradually built up. But what we saw in that short time frame is people were going from, we had some strong boys, mate. Like they were already like 160 kilo squatters. For somebody that isn't a strength athlete, that's fucking decent.
Are these are boxers? Sorry.
No, this was a para table tennis.
All right.
So 160 kilo squat for somebody who has like an upper body impairment, so the legs are fine. And they went from like a 160.
That's pretty good going.
Mate, and they went up to, I'm sure I saw a 190, and this was on a safety bar. So 160 to 190. And it was in like, I'm going to say it was something mad like 4 weeks. And don't get me wrong, I think as soon as you stop training that often, you will see a little bit of a taper off. But just to see how the body reacts to a brand new stimulus that is administered in a really kind of progressive way was sick. That was like my first kind of experience of somebody that had that just seemed to understand, and it was just cool. And it, I guess, similar to, I think we've spoke about it before, Smolov training.
Yeah, I've never actually done small, but I have done Russian squat routine. I actually did it over lockdown, and I put, what was it, 40 kilos on my squat over like the 6 weeks or whatever it was.
Is that what it is? 6 weeks?
Yeah. It nearly, well, it didn't kill me. It nearly killed me. And then I recovered and I squat 340. Like, it works.
Yeah.
But I actually, interesting note on that, I got told, well, not told, but kind of, it was kind of a thing of I was too strong to do it because I wouldn't be able to recover. And as far as I know, I might be the strongest guy who's ever actually ran that program, because it was a thing of like, well, if you squat over 260, it's too intense. And I was like, oh, we'll try it, we'll see. Turns out, again, like a lot of things, it's complete people being lazy. And it works really well. I almost think it works more well because I was so strong, because my body's in such a good position to adapt, rather than it can be wasted on someone who's not quite as strong, who hasn't exhausted other methods. So I think saving it until being a really advanced lifter was a really good thing.
I agree, mate. I think there's I'm going to butcher who basically said this, but there's a saying around with like new stimuluses, new stimuli. That's right, innit? New stimuli.
Yeah.
When
Novel
you've got an
stimuli.
athlete, novel stimuli. When you've got a new athlete and you give them a new stimuli, and they're not ready for it, you rob them twice, because one, they don't get the most out of it because they're not, adapted enough to really benefit from that high intensity stimulus. But you rob them a second time because when they actually go back to doing that, when they're actually ready, they've already kind of partially adapted. So you've robbed the guy twice by pushing him along too soon. And you see that all the time, like if I go back to my pure gym days, I see people that haven't lifted for 2 weeks and now they're already doing contrast training. They're already trying to do what the new powerlifter on Instagram's doing and all that stuff. And we all get a little bit twitchy feet, don't we? We all kind of look around and, get that FOMO sometimes. And is that something you've ever encountered? Have you ever kind of caught yourself in a little bit of fear of missing out and, wanting to do that thing that everybody else has done, or not really?
You know what? I'd say that's my biggest strength, is not, because I'm self-coached, I've got to be really objective, like to a massive extent. And I've never I might have tried the odd lift or challenge just to see it, but I can't say I've ever really done a training method because it was like the cool thing to do. Like, for example, there's a guy called Shane who's a really well-known coach and an incredible athlete in the weight class strongman. And he has guys, he's had a lot of success with doing eccentric and then isometric blocks. And it's something for years I've been thinking about, just doing an eccentric focus block. I've done it with clients, but I haven't done it yet because I thought, well, I've got more to get out of more simple stuff yet. So until I've kind of run out of more basic methods, I'm not going to try that. So like you say, I've been wanting to keep stuff like that in the tank, so I have got something to go to. So there's a few methods like that I want to try, but I thought I haven't got enough out of the basics yet. and I can bring them in the coming years when the kind of more basic stuff stops working.
Exactly, mate. You've got some secret weapons there. There is no secret weapons in strength training, but you've got stuff that you haven't used yet that you can just use to bust through that plateau. It's that thing of, you wouldn't use a grenade to do the washing up when you can just wash the shit. It's easy. No, that makes a lot of sense. So moving through to, going back to what we were originally talking about before I went off on one a little bit. So when you're kind of preparing the different strength sports then, you said that you do sprint, and I know you jump, I know you throw. Is this one of those things that you just program for yourself based off what you said early on, because you know your body, you know your training history, and you see that as a specific weakness? Do you ever program that for your athletes, either strongman, powerlifter, or Olympic weightlifters?
We should probably tell everyone that we learned how to backflip together. It was a special moment.
We did, mate. It was sick. It was that was my housemate at the time. She was a cheerleader, and she was unreal. She's a good coach as well. And it was sick because it happened so progressively. That was the beauty of it. Like when we think about how we coach, and we gradually add a cue, we layer up over time. It's exactly what she did. But yeah, we did. We backflipped together, and that's our claim to fame, mate.
So yeah, with regards to like sprinting and jumping, all that kind of stuff, it's a strength of mine, but it's always been a strength of mine that's. So again, you often have really good athletes come to strongman. They might be a thrower or a sprinter, and they put a lot of weight on, and they think, well, I'm naturally explosive, I'm fast, and then over the years they've become a little bit more static. The power's not quite there, the speed's not quite there, and then they get to a point where often you see guys are trying to get back, they try and become more athletic, but I've seen guys do it and they're 38 and they're 160 kilos. They used to do the first spot 100 kilos when they were 22. Trying to get things back like that is tough. So for me, it's always been, it's like, this is a strength. I want this to be a strength. When I'm 38 and about to retire, still want to be the fast one, the explosive one. So it's always been a thing I keep in at least a fair chunk of the year, is some explosive work, some dynamic work, something where my body's got to react to load like a chaotic way. Like I really like doing bouldering, the climbing itself, but even falling off a wall and not, hurting myself at 20 stone. It was just a really good body awareness thing, which is great for being explosive, but also great for reducing injury risk, because I know I can get in awkward positions and not feel like I'm going to snap. So I have pretty much all my clients will jump. Maybe not if they're. I've got one guy who's particularly heavy and has been even heavier and has got really bad knees, so he doesn't jump. I've been trying to do some more explosive stuff that's less impact. But pretty much all my clients will jump to some extent. I've got some doing hill sprints. I've got a lot doing throwing. So yeah, I'm always trying to get everyone doing something explosive, something that's quite low load, but really high velocity.
Hi guys, I'm just going to take a brief break in today's podcast to talk to you about the Adapt online strength and conditioning coaching service. At Adapt, we put the athlete first and make sure that the whole program is set up around them, their goals, their sport, and their lifestyle to achieve the best possible performances. Our aim is to deliver an elite level coaching experience that typically isn't always commercially available if not part of a professional club or performance pathway system. We communicate with our athletes on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, making changes in technique and making alterations to the program based on how you're performing on any given day. We also bring in experts from psychologists, nutritionists, and physiotherapists for online educational workshops to make sure we are giving you all the tools necessary to excel in your sport. So if you're looking to take your physicality to the next level and want to invest in yourself, head over to the website at adaptstrength.co.uk for more information, including some success stories of our current athletes, or drop me a message to set up a chat to discuss the options. Hope you're enjoying today's episode, so let's get back to it. Got you. So I think what I kind of took from that, mate, and, kind of interrupt me if I'm wrong, is, the explosive stuff, even though in strongman, the pure explosive stuff isn't really part of the event, other than like keg throws. I don't know if there's any other like pure explosive stuff.
Yeah, well, we do have throws for height, which they might be in 5% of the comp, so it is an event, but yeah, it's not your bread and butter like some of the slower lifts are.
Yeah. So I guess typically we can say that speed and jumping and that type of stuff is not part of the actual event, so the competition event doesn't include those things. So running, jumping, throwing is more like the general prep stuff, so
Yeah.
it's the stuff that you're putting in, whether you have it in all the time as like a baseline thing as part of an extended warm-up or whatever, or whether you have like specific phases in the off season where you kind of hammer that. It sounds to me like you almost use that as a preventative measure to tick a lot of different boxes to make sure you don't have any specific weaknesses, from an injury prevention standpoint. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So I normally have a power phase at least once a year, where I'll do. So generally my trade at the moment, I actually haven't got any jumps in, which is the first time in years. But I am doing a lot of throwing, and I end up jumping around and when I go for walks, I jump over things anyway. So like I'm not doing my 5 freezer box jumps isn't gonna let me forget how to jump. But say generally if I'm doing jumping in training, it might just be a box jump or maybe a broad jump, maybe like a vector jump, but it's all quite basic. Whereas in my actual power phase, when I'm not lifting quite as heavy, recovering better, focusing more on actual max output, I'll do more. So I'll do depth jumps, drop jumps. I'll do like broad jump series. I'll do jumps with run up, single leg jumps, more sprinting. So I'll kind of go a little bit more into depth with the plyo type stuff. And yeah, it's great because it's so much body awareness. It's really, it lets your body move as quickly as possible, high velocity. So your tendons, etc., don't freak out as much when they're under that massive power output. And doing it at such a high body weight means it carries over quite well to the heavy weights for extra lift. And it just people see the term bulletproofing, don't they? But it just reinforces that robustness and durability, which is a massive thing. Touch wood, I've never had any major injuries, and that's kind of one of my big strengths, where other guys might have 6 weeks out with a little injury, where generally I'm always training pretty much to the 100%. So that's been a big part of it, I think, just doing those bodyweight movements where my body's just got to adapt to move as a unit and always be ready for some kind of chaotic movements where I'm not, sat in one place and just lifting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm very, not to kind of piggyback off that, but I'm very much of that opinion as well. I think the plane of motion, the range of motion, and the speed of motion you don't train in is usually the one you get injured in. So if you ever get roped into a 5-a-side football match and you haven't ran in a little bit, well, see you later, hammy. You want to be able to know that you are adaptable, robust in a lot of different ways. And that's kind of my thought process. And I can't remember who said this. I've got the worst memory in the world, but they explained performance. That was it. It was Gary Hutt from GB Boxing. He's their current S&C coach. And he explained some of the philosophy that he either has or had in the past around like a boat. So you've got a boat and you've got a sail, and they've got to this elite level of boxing. I can't remember what sport he was on about. By relying on their super strengths. If you've got a knockout artist, they're at the top level because they knock people out. Or if you've got somebody who is a slow plodder and just kind of runs the time down, they've got to that point because their cardiovascular system is so good. And that is the thing that's won them fights and got them to this elite level so far. So they operate off like a super strengths model of just like, that is their super strength. I need to make that better. That's the thing that's winning them. And they go after that, but only once they've plugged any holes in the bottom of that ship first, because those little holes in the bottom of the ship, do you know much about ships? Is it the stern? Like the stern, Captain Jordan Webster. So they try and plug the bottom of that ship, essentially what you just said there, the robustness, the bulletproofing, to make sure that doesn't sink the ship and doesn't put them away from training in the long run. And I think that basically echoes what you just said there, is taking care of the stuff that's going to get you injured, and then just focus on what you're good at and what the sport demands from you. Does that make sense? Have I explained that well enough?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I was thinking about boxing then with Danny Wilson. So Jordan Gill, one of his fighters, who's a really, really good up and coming pro. I think he fights at featherweight, but he was always a guy who was a really good technical, fast boxer who'd win on points, wouldn't really hurt people. I know Danny's done a lot of strength work with him, and in his more recent fights, even though he's gone up a level, he's hurting people, he's getting some knockdowns, and he's like, people are respecting his power more. So he's not just relying on having to outbox people and having to land 150 shots. He's built up that weakness so that where he's getting some respect, and he's got another weapon. But yeah, that's exactly it. Like, you have so many guys, like in Strongman, everyone focuses on deadlift and log, even though the loading medley is exactly the same amount of points. And a lot often, like, the conditioning events are easy to improve because conditioning generally is quicker to improve, quicker to go. Whereas putting 10 kilos on your log at an elite level is a long slog. So you might have some guy that say beats me at log press by one place, you've got out listen of 5 kilos, but if I'm 15 seconds faster on a medley, that's a lot. That's a lot easier for me to bring up and get those points rather than absolutely smashing one event to maybe get one extra point. So it's all about, yeah, like you said, well, another ship analogy, kind of like what's the word? A rising tide lifts all boats, isn't it? So you need to bring up everything at once and kind of bring up your floor rather than just pushing up your ceiling. And then you've got a baseline across all events, and then from there you can build up, but you're never going to drop below a certain point.
Absolutely, mate. I think, yeah, I'm going to change the name of this podcast to the Adapt Pirate Podcast, I think, because that's where we seem to be heading. Gar, that's my best pirate.
Port is left, starboard's right.
Is that what it is?
It is.
It's I can remember doing
Just
that.
saying, I'm a bit of an expert.
It seems that way. Yeah, I like what you said there as well about ticking all those weaknesses, because obviously you've got tacticians in every sport. If you can know ahead of time who your opponent is in boxing, then where they're strong, where they're weak. You're probably most of the time not going to attack their strengths. You're not going to be like, right, I'm going to knock out the knockout artist. You're going to be like, well, actually, I'm going to keep my distance, tire him out. And I suppose, is this kind of the same in strongman? Like, your strengths already. You're like, okay, right, I'm wank at deadlifts. I'm not going to win that deadlift event. So I need to make sure I at least don't lose too many points, but I'm going to hammer home the medley and the other stuff. Does that happen, or is it kind of just a turn up and go?
It certainly happens, but it's actually the wrong way around with strongman. So for me, example, my week event is the deadlift. 5 times a week, even been up to 6 times a week, absolutely hammering it to bring that up. Whereas my pressing's good. It could be better if I focused on it, but the amount of work to get the most points will be tough. So, like my last comp for Brits, I wasn't doing a massive amount of pressing. I did all right in the press. I really hammered the deadlift and did a lot better than I had done previously. So really with strongman, you kind of want to rely on your strengths without focusing on too much and really hammer your weak points. Because if you've got to go from, say my deadlift was 45th in the world and I brought it up to 25th, that's a massive improvement. But say my log press is 14th, getting that up to 9th is such a, it's so much more work to go into that for a small gain. So it really is trying to tick off the big improvements. Now you will get to a level, hopefully I'm getting there with my deadlift, where I haven't got any big weaknesses, and then I can start to specialize a little bit more on my strengths. But until my deadlift's really up to par, that's going to be the focus for every training block. Even the more general stuff, it's still working around what's going to be better for my deadlift before I start bringing up my best events.
Makes sense, mate. It's with that. Where does grip come into strongman then? So you were saying before you did 2 grip events, 2 grip days when you were training like your 11 or 12 times a week. 2 grip days, and then you said you're bouldering. Did you class that as like an extra bit of grip, or was that more like recreational fun rather than actually trying to get a stimulus?
Oh, no, it's I really enjoy it. I pretty much love any kind of train. I really love bouldering, but no, it really was a focus. Like, I'm going to work hard because I was coming out of those sessions. I'd lift in the morning and I was coming out of ball being dead. Like my forearms were just numb. I was covered in sweat. Like I really enjoyed those. It'd be good to get back to it into the next off season. But yeah, it was a massive grip stimulus because the thing with grip, for any sport, your hands are the contact point, aren't they? So there are some events in strongman where, like a deadlift, you got straps on, grip's not really important, but 90% of the things is where it's your grip. It might not be like a farmer's walk where that's a limiting factor, but if you can get if you've got stronger grip, stronger wrists, you can pick up a sandbag more securely. You pick up an atlas stone more securely. You don't have to worry about tacky going wrong and relying on that as a crutch. So it's always a good thing if you can be secure in an implement. Your grip can kind of get you out of jail a little bit. And now at the moment in strongman, the grip strength overall probably isn't as good as it was probably going back 20 years. The main gym lifts are a lot better, but a lot of guys have quite weak grips. So I'll go into a competition with a grip event and know it's like, right, that's strong. I can train it a lot without too much kind of recovery, kind of, debit, say. And I know I've got big points there. And it really is a banker for me that doesn't take too much effort to train or too much time, but you can get a lot of gains in a quite a short period.
Sick. And I think I've always been under, you'll know more than me on this point, under the assumption that grip training is like really, really fatiguing in a sense of like central nervous system wise. Like you do a grip session or you do a few grip events and it absolutely shags you. Is that true, or is that kind of like a little bit mythy?
I've always heard that. What I will say, definitely grip is very neural. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like the muscles involved are tiny. So if you're having a bad day, your grip's going to be off. It's not like some lifts where you can probably muscle through them. Like, say, just as simple like captain's crush hand gripper. If your nervous system's a little bit off, you're just going to be a bit off. But as much as I've heard that it's very neural and it drains you, I find that's really not the case. It's definitely affected by your nervous system being activated and fresh, but the actual fatigue it brings is it seems almost zero compared to heavy lifting. So, I mean, I do a heavy deadlift session. Like if I really push it, I'll know about it the day after. I can max my grip out and I might lose a couple of percent off the top end, but if I'm just doing a normal session, I won't notice it. So I think that comes a little bit from probably people studying like neural output after grip and stuff, rather than people that are actually doing it themselves and training and just seeing how they feel. Because it's probably one of those where the study of it academically wise isn't crossing over to the kind of in the trenches type deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a million and one examples of that where the laboratory trying to prove a specific quality or an adaptation just isn't really what's actually happening in the real world. And hopefully they'll meet one day. That makes a lot of sense.
Just a quick note on that. So I have a lot of trouble with kind of scientific literature when it comes to training, especially around participants, because it's always a college-age male that recreates. It's like you're probably getting guys that have never done any grip training, probably don't lift that heavy. They've done a big grip session, and then their nervous system will be fatigued. But if you get someone who's been doing strongman 11 years, their grip's pretty good. They've got a pretty good endurance. Like say you got a blacksmith doing a heavy grip workout, he'd be fine the next day. So I just think I'm always cautious of who the actual participants are in studies like that, because it's very hard to replicate high level athletes in people that aren't as well trained. But I'll leave you to it.
No, absolutely, mate. I 100% agree with that. And I think there's definitely, at least what I've kind of spotted, a culture around evidence-based training kind of creeping into the way people train more and more, which is good. It's definitely a good thing because people are thinking about it and trying to understand what goes on a lot more. But I think when you're not highly critical of journals and the scientific stuff that goes on behind, and all you do is read the abstracts, you're going to miss all that vital information. I can remember doing an all-nighter in the library when I was on my undergrad. And I was that guy. I was the abstract surfer. I'd be like, bang, 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 reference, reference, reference.
Reference.
Yeah, that's it. I just, give me one sentence. I'm getting as many references in as possible. And I can remember going back, after I did the all-nighter, probably rereading it 2 days later. And I realized that I'd referenced something in rats, but I hadn't mentioned it, and obviously, and those kind of studies do really exist because that's how we kind of formed our first basis of, what a tendon can do. I think was done on frogs initially, and that's how we learn. And but if you're not aware and you don't read into the actual journal, you're going to miss all that information, which provides all that context. So, mate, solid point by you. Moving on to the opposite side of that, then. So you mentioned how a lot of stuff is kind of mismatched in terms of undertrained athletes and us applying, taking what you do with an undertrained athlete and applying it to us just wouldn't work because it's different. What about the guys at the top? Okay, so what are the guys at the top from your experience doing really, really well? And what do you feel like could push them forward in terms of strength and performance? Like, what's your opinion on those types of, like, the training philosophies up there?
So in terms of strong, which obviously the most exposure I've got to at top level, I think what a lot of guys now are getting right, a lot more of coaches, a lot more professional. They literally have more money and more time to do whatever they want to do. So the recovery game is improving massively. You've got a lot of guys that they're going to physios regularly, they're stretching more often there, they've got cryo chambers or even down to, I mean, some things can kind of get overplayed, but they've got time to sleep properly. They're not working shifts. They can get 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep. They can have a nap. The nutrition's better. So I think guys are generally coming at a more professional angle and recovering between sessions and just acting like a good athlete is getting a lot better. I think there's a bit more focus on general conditioning now, which is good. Mobility has become a big thing in strongman. Like, a lot of guys are doing mobility sessions now. They might have a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher, or someone that's helping them with it. Although the big thing that everyone misses, and I have it with my clients, I really try and drill it across. Everyone's too sympathetic. They can't. People do a lot of mobility work and they're stiff as a board. I think a lot of strongmen, they just can't switch off. The general muscle tone's too high, everything's tight, and they kind of miss the boat of it on that. They're putting all this time in and resources rather than just learning how to relax. Because you still look at a lot of guys and they're really immobile, but they're doing all this mobility work. So that's an interesting one I see. And then I think people are training events more specifically now, which is another positive, rather than just relying on general carryover from gym lifts. But I still do think there's a bit of a, maybe sometimes a laziness, maybe not a laziness, but sometimes a hesitancy to push a bit too hard, if you know what I mean. Like, I think some people go a little bit too much with the focusing on the recovery.
Yeah.
And because I know guys that have had, like, I have a physio in the gym with me, and if something's tight, I'll have a massage. I'm like, that's great, but let's not get too far away from 5-5 squats, because that's what's going to make you strong. Like, do all the stuff out of the gym, but there's no substitute for just hard work. So I think that guys, once they get a little bit better, I think they can almost talk themselves into not needing to train as much, and therefore not quite putting as much effort in on the basics and wanting to do everything else that comes with being a pro athlete. So that's my observation at top level strongman.
That's interesting, yeah. And I think, I suppose it's a little bit of that pendulum thing. You've got kind of the hardcore, I guess it's referring more to powerlifting. It's probably what I know a little bit more around. Think back to like Westside Barbell, and people are just like having a bloody nose every other day, and they're fully sending it. If we think about the stimulus recovery adaptation curve, they're hammering the stimulus, but maybe not getting enough of that recovery. And what you're saying now is potentially in strongman, they might not be getting enough of that stimulus, but they're fucking, they recovered well, probably to the point of being quite slothy. Obviously, that's probably an over exaggeration, but that's the way the pendulum seems to be swinging back and forth over time.
Yeah, that's it. Obviously it varies between athletes, but I'd say as a general trend, there might be a little bit too much focus on the fancy recovery side rather than actually just grafting. Because I know the thing is as well, a lot of quite be interesting being in my place as someone who's got like a strength conditioning background and has quite a base of sports, and then seeing some of those movements coming to strongman more. So people are doing more kind of non-sagittal plane stuff, rotation work, which is all stuff that I do, but you get a lot of coaches that go too far that way, and they try and make things too fancy, and they try and focus on too much on the non-strength side, because as much as I do that supplementary work, you just got to be strong. You've just got to be strong. So it is a balancing act. And I think too many people are either they're a powerlifting coach, they get them to squat, bench, deadlift, or they're an S&C coach and they get them doing marches and hurdles and footwork drills. It's like you need to be in the middle, but it's hard to get someone who's got a background enough from kind of both aspects to actually gel in the middle and create the best athlete.
I agree, mate. Now, and I think, I don't know about you, but I've been both of those guys over my time. You know, I've been that S&C guy. I probably still am an S&C guy, to be fair, but I've been that S&C guy, which would just do a banded distraction. You know, the banded distraction stretches would solve, you know, world hunger, you know, and then I've gone the other side and I'm like, no, we specialize, we hammer it. And I agree. I think there needs to be a
push band on it. Measure it. Measure the velocity.
Let's do that. Let's occlude
Got some fat student rugby player, but if we put a fucking VBT on him, goodness, make him stronger. He trains once a week, drinks 4 times a week, but
yeah, I agree, mate. And I think exactly right. I think sometimes you've got to be able to laugh at where the industry is and how, you know, sometimes we focus or we over egg one thing over another, but ultimately what it comes down to is making people better at the sport, keeping the most important thing. So I want to touch on the taboo subject then around, you know, the top end, the elite stuff. You know, we're gonna sell it here. So there's talks, you know, and whether it's true or not in the elite kind of strength sport realm, there is a certain amount of like performance enhancing drugs and those types of things. And, you know, I've had conversations with you before, and I know that you're openly a natural athlete. So maybe maybe the insight you can give us in this topic is maybe quite limited because you haven't done it. You know, that's definitely a possibility. But do you think, you know, within observation of strength sports, people say, okay, he can get away with doing silly training programs because he's on gear? Or do you think that's kind of too simplified?
So that's always been what I've read. It's always been what I've read. If you're on drugs, you can do X, Y, Z, you can recover much better, blah, 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 blah. People often quote the Bulgarian, Abdijayev, the Bulgarian weightlifting team, they're on drugs so they can train 8 times a day or whatever. In my experience, as far as I know, I train a lot more than any other strongman, at least at an open weight. I kind of find the opposite to be true. And what you generally see with guys that are using performance enhancing drugs are they get injured more often. Like as a really big rule, they get injured more often. So I think the work capacity thing is overdone. And I think more of the case of people that are on using drugs is holding them back more because the strength gains come so quickly. So it's actually doing less. And as a natural athlete, actually pushing more because you need the stimulus to get the gains. I know from a few good coaches, that's their philosophy too. Because there's a guy called Shane who I referenced earlier. He did a natty or not video on me on YouTube, which is quite a funny watch. But he basically said, like, everyone gets stronger than him. They get injured. They go down a little bit. Paul comes up here. Everyone, they get back. They get really strong. They come back. And then, so it's like as a guy who's not taking it, it's a very slow, gradual burner. Whereas if you're taking things, you do get stronger faster. And it's all about holding yourself back and not pushing too hard. So I don't actually think you can recover more because all your structures won't recover the same way. Like your muscles might, your tendons generally won't adapt as quickly. So it is more of a case of being more careful if you're using drugs than if you're not. So I do think it's kind of a bit of a myth of always on drugs so you can handle massive amounts of volume.
That's interesting. You know, I think my first kind of experience around I guess, the negatives of performance enhancing drugs was I broke my hip like 5 years ago. So I got a stress fracture in the neck of my femur. And I went to the hospital to get it seen to and all those things. And one of the questions they kept asking me was, do you use steroids? Do you use steroids? And at this point, I was super naive, and I was like, I thought I was big, I'm like, yeah, I'm a big lad. I was joking. I was like, I took it as a compliment, but it didn't click until afterwards where I was like, okay, is there something in that? Is that a actual...
Sorry to jump in here. I just have a funny story. I went to the doctor a few years back. I don't actually remember what it was wrong. It might have been, was it some skin thing? Well, anything major. But he asked me if I'm on anything. It was a really obese woman. And she was like, are you on any muscle building stuff? Like, I was like, oh, of course they're going to ask like steroids. And I was about to say no, or protein. And I was like,
yeah. Well,
I eat a lot of protein, but yeah. I don't take if we're equating that, I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah, mate, I've been there as well. I don't know. My mum, when I first started going to the gym and I ordered like my first batch of like my protein.
Get your Holland and Barrett wave protein.
Yeah, that's it. It was Holland and Barrett where they charged like 20 quid for a serving. It was a fucking rip-off. Yeah, that was bullshit, that. And it tasted awful, mate, as well. I can remember having to blend it up and it was still awful.
But yeah, like that's what you have to do as a lifter to get the gains, like to earn them.
Absolutely. So when you were saying you used to do the Argos weight tree, that was me as well. So what was it, like a 1.25, a 2.5 and a 4.5, like a V-fit tree?
Yeah.
And mate, I actually used those over lockdown as well, because I went back and I had no equipment. So I've just lobbed them in a backpack and I was smashing it. But yeah, I did the exact same thing. But yeah, anyway, so going back to that was my first exposure to somebody questioning like the negative side effects. Like I'd never really thought about it. And, there's probably a few examples around social media. And I don't think it was Larry Wheels that did it, but the guy that basically tore his pec off.
Tore his pec minor, didn't you?
Mate, and his full chest just come across his body. And it was the other guy. And it was, oh, mate, that was awful. And no doubt there's probably an element of ego of him pushing along too soon without waiting for those small steps climbing. But yeah. I just wanted to ask you, it's one of those things that it is a little bit of a taboo subject, even though we know it does go on in sport. That's the thing, it's kind of that thing that's swept under the rug a little bit. And for somebody that's, obviously at the top of the game, I thought you definitely have some insights into that. But yeah, so I want to leave it there, mate. Actually, I've really enjoyed this and it's absolutely flown. And I definitely want to get you on again, just because it's just fun to chat about training and bullshitting and everything. So I really appreciate your time, mate. Where can we find you? So on social media and everything, where can we kind of keep up to date with your training and everything?
Well, yeah, it's been really fun, mate. It's been good. It's been good to get into like a bit of a deep dive of training. Like I said to you before, a lot of kind of strongman interviews you get, they're quite general and you can't really get into proper strength training topics. So it's been really fun. So anyone wants to contact me. So I'm mainly on Instagram, really social media wise. I've got Facebook and YouTube, but they're not very active. So if you go onto Instagram, if you ever put Pulse with Strongman or Pulse with 94, I should pop up. And then if anyone wants to email me, paulsmithstrongman@gmail.com. So nice and simple. But yeah, if anyone has any questions or wants to get in touch at all, either drop me a message on Instagram or email me and I'll get back to you.
Sick. I'll put those all in the description just so people can find them really easily. And if they want to head to your Facebook, I'm sure they can find some embarrassing pictures from like 10 years ago as well. I'm sure. Yeah, we love the classics. But yeah, really appreciate your time, Paul. Thank you very much, mate.
Oh, you're welcome, mate. It's been good to chat.
Thanks for listening to the Adapt Performance podcast. Let me know what you thought about the episode by leaving a review or sending me a direct message. I'm all for receiving the honest feedback to make sure the episodes grow and get better and better. Like, share, subscribing and following all goes a long way to making sure the podcast reaches the right people. Thanks a lot. Catch you next time.